got to stand up strong. Ain't the truth about themselves to understand what went wrong. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way. I know we can find a way to stand up, stand up, stand up.
Oh, okay. So, we are ready for Joe Piscopo. And Joe is out of New York. And his radio show is the Joe Piscopo Radio Show, AM 970, The Answer. And so Joe wanted to ask me a few questions, talk to me for a minute about this whole George Floyd thing and all that stuff. Let me go to Joe, and I'll get to your calls in a minute here, your calls.
Reverend.
Joe.
Reverend, I got you there.
Yes,
Reverend,
sir.
I got you there.
Absolutely.
How you doing? This is why we're doing this. You're all around the country, Reverend. Thank you so much. Welcome to New York, my friend.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Nah, it's our privilege, sir. It's our privilege, Reverend Peterson. I know the great work that you're doing, and I know you've seen the protests around the country, sir. And, I mean, I'm a guy, I've been saying it all morning, that has helped the at-risk community for the last 25 years of my life. And your thoughts, sir? Because you know what, Reverend, I wanted to ask you this. I went through the riots in '67 in Newark, New Jersey, my parents' hometown. That's where my people come from, Newark, New Jersey, right?
Yes.
We saw Newark burn. Have we not learned anything from that, sir? And give us your overview of what's happening with this tough time in America.
So what's happening right now is for the last 70 years, white people have been made to feel guilty about the destruction of the blacks. And the blacks are suffering not because of slavery. It has nothing to do with slavery. It has nothing to do with Jim Crow. It has nothing to do with racism. As a matter of fact, there's no such thing as racism. It's a made-up word by the race hustlers in order to divide and conquer. Black people are suffering due to the destruction of the family, the fake black leaders, who we never had before the Civil Rights Movement, and the brainwashing that's taking place in the public schools and places like that. And so they made white people feel guilty about their failure. And out of the guilt, they noticed that white people would not stand up and correct the blacks and let them know, I have nothing to do with your situation. If you had a father and mother in the home and didn't have so-called leaders, your life would be amazing. But the whites have gone along with it, not all, but most. And now they have discovered, the race hustlers and the Black Lives Matter, they have discovered that white people have fear and that they're not going to speak up. They're not going to stand up for the greatest country in the world. They're not going to stand up for what is right. And so now they are really attacking white people, making them kneel and lick their boots and clean their feet and all. I mean, it's amazing the fear that I see in white America. It's mind-blowing. And this funeral is not about George. It's about getting President Trump, the great white hope, out of the White House and putting in Democrats and turning America into a socialist society. Even Reverend Lawson that spoke at the funeral, he said that we got to clean out the White House at a funeral. It's not about George. It's about taking over the country and turning it into a socialist society.
You know what, Reverend Jessie Lee Peterson, we are live on the Reverend Show. The Reverend is all around the United States of America. This is a man who has given so much back to his community. You know, Reverend, I started out in Newark with the Boys and Girls Club. I am the ambassador for the Boys and Girls Club of the great state of New Jersey, helping out at-risk children, because I always felt, Reverend, but for the grace of God go all of us. But what's disconcerting to me, I walked the streets of Camden, Reverend, just to let you know, when it was deemed the most dangerous city in the United States, Camden, New Jersey. And we, by the grace of God, we turned that around. And I've been railing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Reverend Peterson, because you know best. Why doesn't corporate America come and bring jobs into these stressed areas? Why? I always say, this is the analogy I use, Nike Why doesn't Nike make the sneakers in the South Side of Chicago? I mean, is that a valid criticism of corporate America, sir?
Well, the reason they're not doing it because Chicago, the South Side, is out of control. If they should set up shop in the South Side of Chicago or any of these inner cities, the people there, due to the lack of moral values, due to the lack of character, will destroy the businesses. They'll go in and they'll steal. They'll burn it down. And so you really can't prosper in the inner cities. And that's not going to change until they change the order. They come back to raising their children in the right way to go. They get rid of the so-called leaders because it's abnormal to have, as an adult, to have someone leading you. Christ is our leader, not some fake Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or the NAACP or Maxine Waters or anyone else. So that's why they don't set up shop, because many companies have tried over the years to open their businesses in the inner cities, but they can't last because they're destroyed by the people that live there.
Yeah, and Reverend, about the police, what that really hurts me because I see how hard the police. I've walked the streets and I've seen the police always be there. God forbid if there's a single mom and there's a domestic abuse situation within the inner cities of the United States, it's the police that show up.
Yes.
If God forbid a kid is hurt, the police show up. They're using the police as an excuse here. And what happened to George Floyd, man, it's the most egregious, horrific incident that I've ever seen happen to another human being, not to mention just a police officer. But is it fair to vilify the police departments across the country?
Well, I do want to remind you about the businesses. Even in this riot stuff that's going on now, they burned down Walmart and CVS on the south side of Chicago. So they don't. That's not the problem. The problem is a lack of character. And this thing that happened with George Floyd and the white cop, it's no different than any other crime. And that was one cop with one guy, and whatever the rules are in the police department, if the cop was wrong, he should be punished. But George, the death of George was no different than any other death. There are white people being murdered or killed by cops all the time. You don't hear anything about it at all. I have a story coming up of a white guy that was killed by a cop in the same manner that George was allegedly killed by a cop. You ever heard anything about the white guy? But if it's black and it's the cop, then all of a sudden it's a big deal, and it's just so horrific. It's all an act. These people don't care about George. They don't feel any pain about George. They're just using that. In Chicago, the day before yesterday, 18 murders happened. You didn't hear a word about that from the so-called Black Lives Matter. It's all an act, and it's time that we stop pretending that it's real. It's not real. These blacks are using you. They're getting you. They're causing you to say the same thing that they're saying, and when you say that, you're agreeing to a lie, and that's why they can get away with it. It's all an act. It's not real.
Yeah, it's a vital point that you make, Reverend Peterson. It's a vital point that you make. Hey, Reverend, I wonder if it's not the businesses, I mean, the pastors within the inner cities of the United States, yourself included, sir. I mean, that's holding together the cities, correct? I mean, it's okay to believe in God, isn't it? I mean, I know that's politically incorrect to say that, but God is a good thing. I'm afraid to say it on the radio, man. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I have to tell you, when I was growing up on the plantation down in Alabama, I grew up on a plantation. I was born there, and I grew up under the Jim Crow laws. Black people were, for the most part, a noble people then. They believed in God. They believed in marriage. They believed in having children under the umbrella of marriage with a father and a mother. And if they happened to get pregnant out of wedlock, it was an embarrassment. They would either get married before their child was born or leave the state, go somewhere and hide until the baby is born. But they didn't have black leaders. The parents were the leader of the children, and they set the example. But today's black, not all. And by the way, folks, you can call in at 888-7753-773, 888-77-Jessie. Not all, but most black people today do not believe in God. They hate God. And you can tell it because they hate white people. Because if you truly love God, you love your neighbor as yourself. You love all people. And most black people hate white people today, and they blame them for something they never did. They're not even responsible for. And if they believed in God, you wouldn't have 60 to 70% of black babies born out of wedlock. You would not be having this black on black crime that's happening and being omitted by the blacks, including the preachers. The average black preacher today is no different than Jesse Jackson or Louis Farrakhan or Al Sharpton. They don't believe in God. They teach this phony idea of racism. They teach hatred between the races. They make blacks feel guilty. Whites feel guilty and blacks angry. It's just a mess in the black community. And until we start being honest about it, it's not going to get better. You cannot agree with evil and expect things to get better. You have to tell the truth and not hate, and things will get better.
Reverend Jessie Lee Peterson, kind enough to join us. And we're going to let you go, Reverend. We're honored to be on your show. We're honored to have you on this program, on the Episcopal Show, live from New York, New York. Reverend, before we let you go, sir, coming off the plantation, we're pretty much the same age. We went through all the racial strife of the 50s and the 60s.
Yes.
You more so than anybody. Yet you're a stoic, responsible, a stellar individual who loves your fellow man. What words of advice would you give to the younger generation that just doesn't have your tenor or your character, sir, if I may?
I appreciate that, Joe. And they can check us out at rebuildingtheman.com, rebuildingtheman.com, or jlptalk.com. They got to drop the anger. They got to forgive their mothers for turning. God said we must be born again of the Spirit. So they have to forgive their mothers for turning them away from their fathers. And they have to return to their fathers and love their earthly fathers. Because if they don't love their fathers, they would never love God. Whether we know it or not, admit it or not, realize it or not, men are the sons of God. Even if they are in a fallen state, they're still the sons of God. And when you hate the son of God, you hate the father. And so they got to forgive their mothers for turning them away and love their fathers, return to the fathers. And I'm telling you, man, paradise will appear on earth for them. But they got to stop hating. They got to drop the anger. And the anger starts in the home. White people have not done anything to black people. Black people have done this to themselves by not doing it the right way of God and Christ, Christ and man, man over woman and woman over children. It's a spiritual order. And that's what the blacks have to return to and stop being angry. And because anyone who is angry has anger, Satan is your daddy, you're an evil person. So they must return to the Father.
Amen, Reverend. God bless you, Reverend. Reverend Jessie Lee Peterson is a great man right there. Reverend, honored to have you with us on the show, sir. Thank you for the privilege of being on your program as well. Hey, let's do this again, Reverend. Can we do it?
Absolutely. I would love to, Joe. Joe, do you have time for one question from me?
I sure do, sir.
Are you afraid to tell black people the truth?
You know what? It's a good question. I'm measured. I am measured because I've walked the communities of the inner city for many, many years, and I see the pain, and I see how the politicians just totally abandoned the inner city. So maybe yes, to a point, I may be guilty of that, Reverend, yes.
But they need to hear the truth, and the truth is they got to take back their own lives and start having leaders and return to the Father and love what's right and get married, establish the order of the family, and then they'll get better again. Taking white people's stuff is not going to make them better. Free stuff won't do it.
Yeah, right. Reverend, thank you so much. Thank you for your words, and we treasure them this morning, and they are so much needed. Reverend Peterson. God bless you, sir.
You too, Joe.
Look forward to. Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much, Reverend.
Okay.
Reverend Jessie Lee Peterson. He's a pastor, author, talk show host. Oh, got some church.
Amazing. Let me go. I'm telling you, it's not going. The lies and the pretense is not going to change it. And white folks, I warned you years ago, 30 years ago. You need to start speaking up. You need to get involved. You need to stop going along with the okie doke. Look at you now. You're literally licking boots. Bowing down to you have the Black Lives Matter people, a far left liberal radical organization, worse than the KKK, making you bow down to them. And then if you're white and you speak up, don't go along with it, they're taking your jobs. That's not going to change until you stop it. Speak up. Get involved. I don't know how else to tell you. If you doubt me, call your friends over in South Africa, your white friends, ask them what happened. The same thing happened there is happening here. You're putting all these angry black males and females and lesbians and all kind of mess. You even have a man in Minneapolis City Council, I believe. I believe he's the vice president of the city council, dressed as a woman every day going to work. And he a man. He is a male, and they're pretending it's a woman. But when they look at him, in their mind, they're saying, this is a man. But they have to pretend it's a woman. What the? It's a battle between good and evil, right versus wrong, folks.